The night I left her, I wasn't thinking about the future. I wasn't thinking about the years we had spent together or the empty promises we had made to one another. I wasn't even thinking about the fact that I had planned to ask her to marry me all those months ago, before I realized the truth. No, that night, I wasn't thinking about anything other than the feeling in my chest as I stood there, staring at the crowd, watching her dance with him. Clara had always been the life of the party, but tonight, there was something different about the way she moved. It wasn't just the way she swayed with the music, or how her eyes seemed to sparkle under the dim lights. It was the way she held herself when she was with him, how she laughed just a little too loud, how she tilted her head when he whispered something in her ear. I don't think I had ever felt so invisible in my life. I could see them from across the room. I could see him, Damon, his arm around her waist, guiding her as they twirled on the dance floor. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I could see the way she looked at him, like he was something more than just a friend, something deeper, something more intimate. I had known Damon for years. He had been one of my best friends, someone I trusted, someone I considered family. And maybe that's what made it all the worse. Because if it had been anyone else, maybe I would have been able to write it off as a misunderstanding. But Damon? He was supposed to be loyal, just like I was. He was supposed to be there for me. But as I watched him spin Clara around, his hand lingering on her lower back, I felt my stomach drop. The trust one had built over the years was starting to crumble before my eyes. Clara had been distant lately, I'll admit it. But I thought it was just the usual, stress at work, long hours, life getting in the way. We hadn't been talking as much, but I chalked it up to busy schedules. I kept telling myself I was overthinking things, convincing myself that everything was fine, that the cracks in our relationship were just temporary. But that night I saw something I couldn't ignore. I had come to the party thinking it would be a simple evening, nothing extravagant, just a celebration with a few friends. But as soon as we walked into the room, everything felt wrong. Clara had looked at me like she hadn't seen me in weeks, and maybe she hadn't. Maybe in the chaos of her life, I had faded into the background. I watched them, unable to take my eyes off the way they seemed to fit together. He was taller than me, broader too, with a confidence that made my heart race in a way that had nothing to do with excitement. He leaned in close to Clara, his lips nearly brushing her ear, and for a moment, I thought I saw her close her eyes, like she was savoring the moment. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't stand there and pretend like I didn't know what was happening. I could feel the weight of the ring in my pocket, the one I had been carrying around for weeks, waiting for the right moment to ask her to be mine forever. But there was no moment anymore. Not after tonight. I felt the heat of betrayal burn through me, but strangely, it wasn't anger that I felt at first. It was numbness. A cold, gut-wrenching realization that what I had thought was real was just an illusion. That the love I had been so sure of was slipping away, and I was too late to stop it. So I did the only thing I could think of, I left. I didn't tell her. I didn't make a scene. I didn't shout at Damon or demand answers from Clara. I just walked out the door, slipping through the crowd, unnoticed, like a ghost. I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew that if I stayed there a second longer, I would fall apart. I didn't know it then, but leaving her that night would be the first decision in a series of choices that would change everything. I could have stayed. I could have confronted her, demanded an explanation. But deep down, I knew there was nothing she could say that would make it okay. I didn't want to hear the excuses, the explanations. I didn't want to listen to her tell me how it didn't mean anything. No, I had seen enough. The truth was right in front of me, and it was a truth I couldn't ignore anymore. And as I drove through the city streets, the moonlight reflecting off the windshield, I realized something I had never even considered before. The moment you stop trusting someone is the moment you start losing them. I had stopped trusting Clara, and by the time I realized it, I was already too late. I don't know what I expected to find that night. Answers, closure, a sign that everything could be fixed. But what I found was a deep, painful silence. A silence that echoed in my head, in my chest, as I drove away from everything I had known. And that was just the beginning. The beginning of something I couldn't undo, no matter how hard I tried. As I drove, the streets blurred. The headlights of oncoming cars seemed to distort in the rain-soaked night, but nothing could distort the feeling inside me. There was no sound but the hum of the engine and the occasional wiper sweeping away the droplets on the windshield. I couldn't even bring myself to turn the radio on. I didn't want to hear anything. I didn't want to hear anything at all. It felt like I had been punched in the stomach, hard and unexpectedly. I didn't know what hurt more, the image of Clara in Damon's arms, laughing and carefree, or the complete silence that filled my mind. The silence that told me everything I had believed in the last few years was a lie. I had always thought of myself as a rational man. I wasn't the type to jump to conclusions or get emotional over something small. I was patient, methodical. But tonight, I was shattered. And I knew deep down I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't imagining things. When I got home, I didn't go inside right away. I just sat in the car for what felt like hours, staring at the house. The house that had once felt like a sanctuary, a place where I could leave everything behind and just be. But now, it felt cold, distant, almost foreign. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face her, to look into her eyes and ask her the question that had been running through my mind since I first saw her with Damon. Was she lying to me? But even then, I knew. She didn't need to say a word. The truth was already there, unraveling, laying bare everything I didn't want to see. I had been too blind, too trusting, to notice the signs before. The late nights, the odd phone calls, the way she seemed to pull away from me in the most subtle ways. But it wasn't until tonight, until I saw the way Damon looked at her, that everything clicked into place. I couldn't stay in the car forever. So I got out, slowly, dragging my feet like a man about to face his worst nightmare. I walked up to the door, my hand hovering over the handle. For a second, I wondered if she'd even be awake, if she'd even notice that I was gone. And that thought hit me harder than anything else. I wasn't just worried about what was happening. I was worried about what had already happened. How long had I been living in this quiet oblivion? How long had I ignored the things that didn't add up? I opened the door quietly, but the sound of it creaking made it clear that I wasn't as silent as I thought. I stepped inside, my heart pounding in my chest, and for a moment, I considered leaving again. I could turn around, walk out the door, and pretend this was all some terrible nightmare. But I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't the guy who hid from the truth. I saw her. Clara was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes glued to her phone. She didn't even look up when I walked in. The silence between us was thick, suffocating. The distance that had been growing for months now felt like a chasm, too wide to cross. Clara, my voice was quieter than I meant it to be, almost lost in the emptiness of the room. She glanced up, her face softening for a moment. Hey, you're home early. How was the party? I couldn't even respond to her question. How could I? Everything felt wrong. Everything felt like a lie. Clara, I repeated, my voice stronger this time, more firm. What's going on? Her eyes flickered with something I couldn't place. What do you mean? Nothing's going on. I took a step forward, fighting the urge to scream, to shout at her, to demand answers. But I didn't want to lose control, not yet. I wanted the truth, plain and simple. No more games, no more excuses. I saw you with Damon tonight. The words hung in the air, thick with meaning. Clara froze. Her hand tightened around her phone, her fingers almost white from the grip. But she didn't say anything at first. She just stared at me, the silence stretching between us. Clara, don't lie to me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper now. I saw the way you looked at him, the way he looked at you. I saw everything, and you didn't even care. She looked away, her face suddenly pale, her lips trembling. Elijah, No. I cut her off. I'm done with excuses. I want the truth. The words hit harder than I expected. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was just empty. Empty in a way that I had never felt before. The person I thought I knew so well, the woman I thought I trusted more than anyone in the world, she wasn't who I thought she was. Clara finally met my gaze, her eyes avoiding mine as if she couldn't bear to look at me. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I didn't want to hurt you. Her words were like daggers. And with every sentence, I could feel the last thread of our relationship snapping, one strand at a time. But I couldn't stop her from speaking. I didn't want her to stop. I needed to hear it. I needed to hear her confess, to see if the reality I'd been afraid of was real. I don't know when it started, Elijah, she continued, her voice shaking. But Damon and we've been closer than we should be. It's not just him. I've been feeling lost, and I didn't know how to tell you. My heart hammered in my chest, the words barely making sense in my mind. Closer than we should be? Lost. How long had this been going on? How much of this did I not know? And that's when it hit me, the hardest truth of all. It wasn't just her betrayal that cut me deep. It was that she hadn't cared enough to be honest with me. She hadn't cared enough to fix it before it became something neither of us could repair. And suddenly, the ring in my pocket, the one I had been holding onto for months, felt like a joke. I turned away, the words I had wanted to say stuck in my throat. There was nothing left to say. Nothing could change what had just been revealed. I walked out without another word. No final fight. No big confrontation. Just silence. And I didn't know it then, but that was the last time I would ever call her mine. The door clicked shut behind me, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. My mind was a blur, a constant whirl of confusion and disbelief. I found myself walking aimlessly down the street, my hands stuffed in my pockets, the cold air biting at my skin, but I barely felt it. The world around me seemed to have gone silent. The city was moving on, oblivious to the fact that my entire life was falling apart. I kept hearing Clara's words echoing in my head. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. But the more I repeated them, the less they made sense. How could she not mean for it to happen? How could she claim she didn't know how things got this far when I had been right in front of her, every step of the way? As I walked through the streets, I realized something. This wasn't just about Damon. It wasn't just about Clara. It was about the part of myself I had lost along the way. The part of me that had blindly trusted someone who had slowly stopped seeing me. I reached the park. The benches were empty, the lights dim, and everything felt still. I sat down, my head in my hands, trying to gather my thoughts. But no matter how hard I tried to make sense of what had happened, it felt impossible. My chest tightened, and the weight of it all seemed to crush me. For the first time in years, I felt truly alone. I didn't know how much time had passed before I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't have to turn around to know who it was. Clara. She had followed me, of course. She wasn't going to let me just walk away. I couldn't tell if she wanted to apologize, or if she was trying to explain herself. She didn't speak at first. She just stood there, a few feet away, as if waiting for me to make the first move. I could feel the tension in the air between us, thick and suffocating. I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to look at her. I was afraid that if I did, the floodgates would open, and I'd say something I'd regret. But then I heard her voice, soft and hesitant. Elijah, please, let me explain. The words hit me like a slap. Let me explain? What was there to explain? What was there to say when the truth was staring me in the face? But I didn't respond. I just sat there, waiting, trying to steady my breathing. Please, she repeated, her voice cracking. I know I messed up. I never wanted to hurt you. But things between Damon and me, they just happened. I didn't want it to get this far, but it did, and I'm so sorry. Her words were empty to me. Apologies, excuses, they all sounded the same. But still, I turned around, meeting her gaze for the first time since the party. She looked different now, smaller somehow, like the person I had once known was slipping away right in front of me. I don't want your apologies, Clara, I said, my voice low and steady. I don't need you to explain yourself. I need to understand how this happened, how we got here. Her eyes welled up with tears, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sympathy. Not right now. Maybe later, but not now. Now, all I felt was a sense of betrayal so deep it consumed every part of me. I don't know, she whispered, her voice breaking. I don't know anymore, Elijah. And that was the problem, wasn't it? She didn't know. She hadn't known, or maybe she had stopped caring. Either way, the truth was clear. I wasn't enough for her anymore. And I had to face that reality, even if it hurt. I stood up then, my legs shaky, and took a step back. I can't do this, Clara. I can't keep pretending like everything's fine. Like we're fine. Her hand shot out, grabbing my arm. Elijah, please. Don't leave like this. We can fix it. We can. I pulled away from her grasp. No, Clara. It's too late for fixing. It's too late for anything. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of our breathing, the rustling of leaves in the trees. And then, as if something inside me snapped, I turned and walked away from her. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I didn't need to see her anymore to know that I had already lost her. I didn't sleep that night. The hours dragged on, empty and painful. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of what had just happened. Clara's words echoed in my mind, but they didn't bring comfort, only more questions. How long had she been lying? What was I missing? By morning, I knew I couldn't stay in that house anymore. Every room seemed to breathe with memories of a life that was no longer mine. I grabbed a bag, tossed in a few clothes, and walked out without a word. I couldn't face her again, not yet. I had no plan, no destination. I just needed to be away from it all. From her. From Damon. I ended up at a small cafe downtown. The place was quiet, just the sound of coffee machines and hushed conversations. I sat at the corner table, nursing a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The world outside moved on, oblivious to the fact that my life had just crumbled. I had no idea what to do next. No idea where to go. As I sat there, I realized I didn't even know who I was anymore. I had spent so long in that relationship, trusting Clara, building a life together, that I had forgotten about myself. I had given everything to her, to us, and now I had nothing. I felt a tap on my shoulder, and for a moment, I thought it might be Clara. But when I turned around, it was just a stranger, a man in his late 30s with a kind smile. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. I didn't really want company, but I didn't have the energy to decline. "Sure." He took the seat across from me, his eyes assessing me with a knowing look. "You look like you've had a rough night." I didn't respond, but he didn't seem to mind. He gave a little shrug, as if this wasn't the first time he had seen someone in my position. "I used to be a therapist," he said, "before I moved here. Sometimes, people just need someone to talk to." I could have brushed him off, told him I wasn't interested. But instead, I found myself nodding. "Are you married?" he asked, leaning in slightly. I gave a short, bitter laugh. I was. He nodded, as if he'd been expecting that answer. "I see. So what happened?" I stared into my coffee, trying to keep the emotions in check. She betrayed me. I walked in on her with another man. The man's expression softened, but there was no pity in his eyes. "That's tough. But the real question is, what are you going to do now?" I didn't have an answer. I didn't know what to do. I had always thought I had everything figured out, but now? Now I felt lost, like a ship without a rudder, drifting aimlessly. "I don't know," I said, my voice barely a whisper. The man sat back, giving me some space. "You can't change what happened, but you can decide how you move forward. One step at a time. It won't be easy, but eventually, you'll start to find your way again." His words hung in the air for a moment. I wasn't sure if they meant anything, but something about his calmness made me feel a little less alone. But just as quickly as the moment of clarity appeared, it vanished. I didn't know how to start over. I finished my coffee, stood up, and left the cafe without another word. I walked aimlessly through the streets, my feet carrying me with no real direction. The city felt the same as it always had, but it was different now, like the sound of life had been turned down low, leaving only the hum of traffic and distant chatter. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in the middle of someone else's story, not my own. Clara was still in the back of my mind, her face twisted with regret and silence. But I couldn't go back. I couldn't face her again. The man's words still echoed in my head, one step at a time. It was funny how a stranger could speak with so much clarity when the people closest to you couldn't even bring themselves to speak the truth. But even his advice couldn't shake the cloud hanging over me. What now? I wasn't ready to return to my apartment, not yet. The idea of walking back through that door, seeing the place that was once filled with warmth and shared memories, it felt suffocating. Instead, I kept walking, hoping that by putting miles between myself and the mess, I'd find some kind of peace. Hours passed. The sun began to dip, casting long shadows across the streets, and I found myself in unfamiliar territory. I didn't know this part of town, but something about it drew me in. It was quieter, less busy, and for a moment, it felt like I could breathe. I stopped in front of a small, dimly lit bar. There was something about the place that called to me. Maybe it was the need for distraction, or maybe it was the simple desire for noise. I didn't even think twice before I walked inside. The bar was low-key, the kind of place where people came to unwind after work. The air smelled of stale beer and old wood, but it felt oddly comforting. I took a seat at the counter, ordered a drink, and tried to let the weight of the day settle. I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe just a drink to numb the pain. Maybe just a place to sit quietly and think. I didn't expect to see her there. There she was, across the bar, sitting at a table with a man I didn't recognize. My heart skipped. Of all places, Clara. She was laughing, her face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. And he was leaning in a little too close, his hand resting on the back of her chair. I could feel my breath catch in my throat. My eyes stayed locked on them, unable to look away, despite everything in me screaming to leave. She was supposed to be at home, sorting through the mess she'd created. She was supposed to be feeling the weight of what she had done. But here she was, smiling, like nothing had ever happened. I didn't want to see this. I didn't want to see her with someone else, not so soon. But I couldn't stop watching. They spoke softly, heads close together, sharing some private joke. Clara's hand brushed his arm, and for a moment, I thought I saw the same spark in her eyes that she once had for me. Something in me broke at that moment. It wasn't anger. It wasn't jealousy. It was the profound sense of loss. I had never imagined that this would be my reality, that I would be standing on the outside, looking in at the woman I loved, now with someone else. I stayed at the bar for another hour, watching them, trying to make sense of it all. But the more I tried to understand, the more I realized something. I had never truly known her. Not in the way I thought I did. Eventually, they left, and with them, a part of me stayed behind. I wasn't sure how long I sat there after they left, staring into the empty glass before me. The quiet, once comforting, now felt unbearable. The bartender noticed me and gave me a quiet nod. I nodded back, paid my tab, and left. But as I walked out into the night, the world still seemed the same, but I wasn't. I didn't know what came next, but I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer the man I had been. The days that followed felt like a blur. I couldn't escape the heaviness that clung to me, no matter where I went. I spent hours walking the streets, moving from one empty place to the next, hoping that somehow the restlessness inside me would quiet down. But it didn't. I kept thinking about that night at the bar. About Clara. About the man who had taken my place so easily. It wasn't anger that burned inside me anymore. It was confusion, a quiet ache that I couldn't shake. I didn't want to feel this way. I didn't want to care. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, the way she laughed at his jokes, the way she leaned into him. It made me feel invisible. I knew I had to face her. I couldn't keep running from it. But when I picked up the phone to call her, my hand trembled. I had so many questions, so many things I needed to say. But what if she didn't want to answer? What if she had already moved on? I put the phone down. The silence in the room felt suffocating, like it was pressing in on me from all sides. I tried to busy myself. I worked. I ate. I did the things that were supposed to keep me distracted. But nothing worked. It felt like there was an emptiness inside me that nothing could fill. I would see couples walking hand in hand, laughing together, and it made my chest tighten. It wasn't just the loss of Clara that hurt. It was the loss of the future I thought we were building. The life we had imagined, now slipping through my fingers. And then, one evening, as I sat in the same cafe where I had tried to clear my head before, I saw her again. Clara. She was standing at the counter, ordering coffee, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing the same coat I had bought for her last winter. I froze. My heart stuttered in my chest. She hadn't seen me yet. I wasn't sure what to do. Should I approach her? Should I pretend I wasn't there? I wanted to walk over, to demand answers, to ask her why she'd done it, why she'd betrayed me, why she'd moved on so quickly. But I didn't. I couldn't. For a moment, all I did was watch her. Watch her breathe. Watch the way her lips curled into a smile as the barista handed her the coffee. She looked so normal, so untouched by everything that had happened. And that was what hurt the most, the fact that she could just move on while I was stuck here, trying to piece together the shattered remnants of my world. But before I could make a decision, she turned around and saw me. Her eyes widened for a second, and then quickly dropped to the floor, avoiding mine. "Hi," she said softly, like she was unsure of how to approach me. Her voice was almost distant, and it made something inside me twist. I opened my mouth to say something, but the words didn't come. All I could think was why. Why had she done it? Why had everything changed so suddenly? But the silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, looking as lost as I felt. "I didn't expect to see you here," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. I wanted to say something, anything, but instead, I just nodded. I didn't know how to explain the mess inside my head, the hurt that seemed to overflow every time I thought of her with someone else. I didn't know what to say to make any of this feel better. I didn't know where else to go, she added, her voice trembling ever so slightly. And in that moment, something in me shifted. I didn't have answers. I didn't have closure. But I knew that seeing her, seeing how broken she looked, was enough. For the first time since everything had fallen apart, I realized I wasn't the only one hurting. She was too. But that didn't change what had happened. It didn't change the fact that she had betrayed me, that she had allowed someone else to take the place I thought I would always hold. I took a deep breath. "We need to talk," I said finally, my voice steadier than I expected. "But not here." Clara nodded slowly, her eyes meeting mine for the first time since she'd walked in. There was a flicker of something there, maybe regret, maybe guilt, maybe even the hope that this could be fixed. But I wasn't sure it could. I stood up, ready to face whatever came next. And as we walked out of the cafe together, I didn't know what would happen when the conversation finally came. But I knew I was done running. It was time to face it all, whatever the truth might be. We walked in silence, each of us lost in our thoughts. The cold air bit at my skin, but it felt like nothing compared to the chill in my chest. I didn't want to look at her. I didn't want to know what she was thinking. But every step we took felt like one step closer to something I had been avoiding for too long. We found a quiet spot in the park, a bench that overlooked the empty, moonlit paths. The night was still, except for the distant rustle of leaves in the trees. I sat down first, trying to steady my nerves, but Clara hesitated before joining me. She lingered for a moment, her hands shoved deep into her coat pockets. She didn't sit next to me. Instead, she stood a few feet away, like she wasn't sure if she could trust herself to be near me. "I never thought it would come to this," she said softly, her voice almost drowned out by the night. "I never thought I'd hurt you like this." I looked at her, but my eyes didn't soften. "You already did," I wanted to say, but I didn't. I just stared, waiting for her to continue. "I don't even know where it started, Elijah. I felt like I was losing myself, like I was drifting away from everything I thought I knew. And Damon, he was there when I needed someone to talk to. It wasn't supposed to happen the way it did. I never meant for it to go this far." I heard the words, but they didn't make sense. How could she sit there, looking so calm, so collected, and tell me it wasn't supposed to happen? It had already happened. That much was undeniable. I took a breath. "So you just went to him for comfort? That's your excuse?" Her eyes flickered with something I couldn't place. Regret, maybe, or guilt, but it wasn't enough. It didn't change what had happened. It didn't undo what she had done. "No," she said quietly. "It's not an excuse. I don't have an excuse, Elijah. I felt alone, and I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to talk to you anymore." I felt a bitter laugh bubble up, but I swallowed it back. She didn't know how to talk to me anymore? After everything we had shared, after all the years together, this was what it had come to? I couldn't keep quiet any longer. "So you just gave up? You gave up on us? On everything we built?" My voice was growing louder, the anger rising, but it wasn't anger at her. It was anger at myself for being so blind, for not seeing the signs sooner. "I didn't give up on you," she whispered, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "I didn't want this. I didn't want any of it. She stopped herself, her words caught in her throat. I stood up suddenly, feeling the weight of everything pressing on my chest. "I don't know if I can believe you anymore," I said, my voice shaking. "You say you didn't want this, but how could you not know what it would do to me? How could you not know that the moment you let someone else in, you were tearing us apart?" She reached for me, but I stepped back. I couldn't let her touch me, not now. Not when everything felt so broken. "Please, Elijah," she said, her voice desperate. "I know I've messed up. I know I've hurt you in ways I can't even begin to understand. But I need you to know that I never stopped loving you. I didn't know how to fix this, but I was trying. I swear I was trying." I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in days, and I saw the truth in her eyes. She was hurting too, but it didn't make me feel better. It just made everything more complicated, more confusing. I could feel the weight of the ring in my pocket, the one I had never given her, the one I had planned to give her months ago. It felt like a cruel joke now. "Maybe you were trying, but trying isn't enough," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I turned away from her, my heart heavy, knowing that whatever happened next, things would never be the same. I walked away, my steps slow but purposeful. The cool air stung my face, but it wasn't enough to numb the ache that had settled in my chest. For a moment, I thought I heard Clara calling after me, but I didn't turn back. I couldn't. I needed space, needed time to think, to process everything that had happened. But as I walked through the quiet park, my mind racing, something in me began to shift. I'd been so consumed by the hurt, by the betrayal, that I had almost forgotten something important. I was still here. I was still standing. As the minutes passed, the anger inside me started to dull. It wasn't gone, but it wasn't the only thing I felt anymore. I realized that while I couldn't change what had happened, I could change how I moved forward. And maybe, just maybe, that could be enough. I stopped walking and turned around. Clara was still standing by the bench, looking lost and small in the dim light. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time that night, I didn't see the woman who had hurt me. I saw someone else, someone I had loved deeply, someone who was hurting just as much as I was. I walked back to her, my heart still heavy but less burdened. She didn't speak as I approached. She just stood there, waiting. "I don't know if we can fix this," I said, my voice steadier now. "But I know we both deserve more than just this pain. I think I need to try." She nodded, a faint, grateful smile tugging at her lips. She was quiet for a moment, then took a deep breath. "I've been scared, Elijah. Scared of losing you. Scared of everything we built falling apart. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But I want to fight for us. If you'll let me." I stood there, looking at her, and for the first time in days, I didn't feel like I was drowning in regret. I wasn't sure what the future would look like, or if things would ever be the same again. But I did know one thing. I wasn't ready to give up on us just yet. "I'm not promising that it will be easy," I said, my voice softer now. "But I think we owe it to ourselves to try." And in that moment, everything seemed a little less dark. We weren't fixed yet. We weren't whole. But we were standing there, together, facing the truth of our brokenness. And somehow, that felt like the first step toward healing. Clara took a step closer, her hand reaching out hesitantly. I didn't hesitate this time. I took her hand, and for the first time in a long while, we stood there, not as the people who had hurt each other, but as two people trying to rebuild something worth fighting for. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. It might take time. But as we walked back together into the night, I felt a small spark of hope. And that was enough for now.